Today we are having a conversation that I didn't think was really possible, but I guess it is, and now it's here, because today we are talking about one of the most undervalued and potentially underrated players, you could say, exists in the Canadian system, and whether or not he actually is capable of making some sort of an impact with the regular team. Now, of course, you know from the title, you know from the thumbnail who it is we're talking about. We're not talking about him because, oh, this guy's the next McDavid or whatever, he's going to light the lamp on fire and he's going to be the next amazing call-up, but because this guy happens to have been a former New York Rangers top prospect who really did not work out, who is considered one of the bigger busts that team has drafted over the years, and who now happens to be in the Montreal Canadiens system and doing pretty okay. Now, I know it kind of seems like a paradoxical statement, oh, how could he be a bust if he's doing okay? But let's get into that here in this video. So today, we are talking about former New York Rangers top prospect Lias Andersson. And I will say, part of the reason we're talking about him is because I saw a post made on the subreddit that brought his name up, and I was like, huh, that's actually a pretty interesting idea. Let's go out there and talk about that. So Lias Andersson is a Laval Rocket player. 25 years old, 5'11", 185, left-handed center left wing, and he was drafted by the New York Rangers in the 7th overall position in 2017. Why is this noteworthy? Well, it's because if you go over to 2017, you'll see some really great names taken at the top of the draft. Not only do you have Nico Hischier, Miro Heiskanen, and Cale Makar, but you also have Elias Pettersson there at the 5th overall spot. We all kind of remember this, but Elias Pettersson actually happened to be the New York Rangers' preferred target in the 2017 draft, but because Vancouver was ahead of New York, the Rangers couldn't get the guy they wanted. But because they were pretty intent on drafting a Swede, they drafted Lias Andersson 2 picks after. 1 pick ahead of Casey Mittelstadt, a few picks ahead of Gabe Vilardi, Marty Necas, Owen Tippett, Rasmussen, Nick Suzuki even. All the guys taken after Lias Andersson have been, for the most part, great NHL players. And for Lias Andersson, he didn't really have that. You instead had a lot of drama with this guy, disappointment, and a bunch of expectations that weren't fulfilled. This is because Lias Andersson in his draft season was a pretty good point producer in the SHL. He had 19 points in 42 games played, which, if you know anything about the way Swedish hockey works, this is a really big deal for a 17, 18-year-old guy to get half a point a game in the top league in Sweden. The year after that, he had 14 points in 22 games played, just barely under a point per game, which also was seen as a really big deal. He also happened to be a point per game at the World Juniors, and he even had a cup of coffee with the regular Rangers. But as Lias Andersson's career went on with the Rangers and eventually the Hartford Wolfpack, there were a few issues with the way he was progressing, and it eventually got to a point where he went back to Sweden, he played for HV71, there was some sort of unhappiness there, and you could say that Lias Andersson was grouped into this entire conversation of prospects that the Rangers had that just weren't developing well, and you could debate as to whether or not that was the prospects' faults themselves or if it was an indicator of a bigger issue that the Rangers had with their own development. Hey, Lias Andersson's a top guy in 2017, he's doing nothing. You have Vitaly Kravtsov, who was taken in 2018, and he didn't amount to anything either. You have Kaapo Kakko in 2019, who was really slow in his progression, and then you had Alexis Lafreniere the year after that, whose progression also was very bad out of the gate. So, bigger conversations about the Rangers and their development, and eventually saw Lias Andersson get sent over to the LA Kings, where he had spent 3 seasons progressing and trying to get better in their AHL system, and eventually Lias Andersson became a free agent, and he signed his 1-year, one-way contract with the Montreal Canadiens, where he is right now playing for the Laval Rocket. Now, here's the thing about Lias Andersson going out there and suiting up for the Rocket. He's got, at the time of recording this audio, 31 points in 38 games played, on pace for about 43 in a 53-game season. And the reason we're talking about Lias is because of this post made on the Habs subreddit by Neo0009. Do you guys think Lias Andersson should get a shot with the big team? I watch a lot of Laval games, and I think he plays really well, and he has 31 points in 38 games played, which isn't bad. Top comment goes out there and says, hey, I completely forgot we had this guy. They need him to make the playoffs probably. Maybe if we send Waugh down at some point, he could potentially be a call-up. Now, I get what you're thinking. Wait a minute, why would they do that? Josh Waugh has been really good. Like, there's no reason to send him down. Actually, there might be. Because when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens in this season, we could all kind of agree the season's pretty much a lost cause. They're not going to go out there, make the playoffs. They're not going to do anything. So what exactly is this playoffs thing that this commenter is talking about? Well, the Laval Rocket have themselves somewhat of an opportunity at making their playoffs right now. So having guys that could be capable to get sent down, like a Josh Waugh, for example, if there's some sort of a playoff run that the Laval Rocket are trying to go after, then having a guy like Waugh definitely helps out, and it gives the player a really good experience as well. But then you could debate as to whether or not it'd actually be more beneficial to keep Lias down there too. There's another comment that goes out there and says, honestly, it's probably Brandon Gignac that will be the forward from the Laval Rocket that gets recalled if there is an injury. He's already been up before, and he does know the system. I also watch Laval games, Kozad goes out there and says, and although Lias Andersson plays well for that level of hockey, he lacks the upper echelon of skills and doesn't have any outstanding strength, so skating, hockey IQ, physicality, shot, etc., to get him to that next level. He's the definition of jack of all trades, master of none. Just even attributes across the board. He could still make the NHL someday, but most likely in his late 20s when his entire game has grown. And that, I feel, is an unfortunate thing to say about Lias Andersson, because that was always the profile that he was pegged to have heading into the 2017 NHL Entry Draft. Oh, this guy could be a two-way center, he could score goals, he can be placed on the power play, he can be placed on the penalty kill, he can be placed in the defensive zone draws, he can do everything, and he happens to also be a very passionate and heated individual when he gets to it. We all remember that Lias Andersson made headlines when he was in the World Junior team for Team Sweden because he tossed his silver medal into the crowd, and he was really pissed off, and that was a big thing. Really big conversation that we had that opened up about attitude and emotions and everything like that. So for Lias Andersson, having this assessment where it's like, yeah, he doesn't really have too many big skills, but he is a good enough player to maybe do some sort of damage, but not to a big magnitude, it is kind of unfortunate just to see that for Lias Andersson, a guy that two of the biggest fan bases, already tried to capitalize on, in both the Rangers and the LA Kings. They weren't able to find that, and for the Montreal Canadiens, it does not seem like they're going to be able to do that either. That is, unless, of course, the Habs just go out there and make some random out-of-the-blue call-up for Lias Andersson one day, and this entire video looks stupid as a result. So, if you're a New York Rangers fan, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as to whether or not you feel Lias Andersson could be a sleeper Habs extra edition. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to fit that title into the thumbnail and everything, but, yeah, sleeper Hab? That seems like a pretty good idea. I don't know, sleeper Habs ad. That's the thought process that I'm going through right now. Huh, that does seem like an interesting way to put everything into the thumbnail. But Rangers fans, what are your thoughts on the idea of Lias Andersson actually becoming a semi-valuable, maybe even valuable Montreal Canadiens call-up? And for the Habs fans watching this video who also happen to watch Laval Rocket games, what are your thoughts on the idea of Lias coming over? And by the way, if you're wondering, I'm not saying Lias or Lias. I've been saying Lias this entire time because that's kind of how the Swedes pronounce it, to my understanding at least. At least that's what I kind of gathered from a lot of the old videotapes. But either way, thoughts in the comment section below about Lias Andersson and the way that he has played so far throughout his career and throughout the season. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.